Okay, so welcome to our next lesson of compound interest, and in this lesson I'll go over future value, although we have already done the compounding factor. So once we know the compounding factor, and you can see that in lesson number 4, then talking about future value is much simpler. Now remember that compounding factor was basically just nothing else but the growth of $1 over time over all the different terms that we had. Okay, so and we define the compounding factor in this way. Now, what does that mean? Okay, so in terms of our growth, well, we don't just invest or borrow a dollar, right? We can invest or borrow any amount. So if you're looking at a particular timeline, okay, you can begin and start with any amount that you like. Now, we said, for the compounding factor, we started with a dollar and we wanted to know what would happen if we would begin with this dollar and then, over a certain amount of terms, okay, what would that dollar be worth at the end there? And now, in this case, well, we do not have to just invest a dollar. We can invest any amount that we like. And if that's the case, what if we invested $100? Or what if we invested $100,000? Or what if we invested $1 million or borrowed for that matter? So all of these amounts that we have, okay, the starting point of our investment or of our loan is simply known as the present value that we begin with. And as you may recall, this is also sometimes called the principal. Now, it's called the principal because it's the beginning amount. The present value is just simply the starting point of an investment of a loan. Now, I'm not going to be writing present value all the time, so I'll just designate it as PV. And that present value, again, can be any amount. It doesn't have to be a dollar. And once we know that we can invest any amount that we please, then we can take our compounding factor and simply multiply it, so not by a dollar, but by any amount that we're beginning with, so our present value. So guess what? Okay, so this actual formula that we have is now the future value formula of any amount that we may deal with. So our future value is simply nothing else but the compounding factor of a dollar multiplied by any amount that you would like to invest, for instance. Okay, so this is our formula. And now when we're looking at this, okay, do not forget that we have to always know what is our term rate and then also for how many terms are we investing. So if you're going to take this, and let's say we can divide this up into X amount of terms, okay, so and of course this can continue, okay, so this would be, let's say, term 1, term 2, term 3, term 4, and so on. Once we know how many terms we're investing or borrowing for, and somebody tells us what the interest rate is, then we can go ahead and actually try to solve it. Now, what I would want to let you know is what are the steps that I take to try to solve these future value questions. So the actual steps themselves are not that difficult, but for anyone who's beginning, they will be difficult. So one of the first early things that I always think about is I always want to write down all the givens from a question, right? So now, what do I actually need to solve a future value formula? I need to know what the present value is. I need to know my term interest I, so my compounding interest or rate, and I need to know how many terms. Now that is dependent on certain things. And remember, we can compound at different periods. We can compound monthly and semi-annually. We can compound weekly and so on, and you can take a look at one of the earlier lessons with regards to that. So what I always like to do with future value is the following, and all of them are actually the same. Once I see compounding in the question, I know that I will have, okay, or I will need to know, all right, what am I compounding at? And that tells me how many terms I have per year. Now, if I know how many terms I have per year, I can find out next how many terms I have in total. Now, the next item is I need to know, okay, so what is the nominal interest rate that I am compounding at? And if I know that, then I can obtain my actual term rate. So those are the first four items that I look for in any question. So that's kind of step number one. Now the next item, of course, is, okay, I take a look. All right, well, what is the present value or the principal that they want me to compound? I mean, if it's $1, all right, but it may not necessarily be $1. So it is some amount that I have. And this is what I do for every single question. It doesn't matter what the question is. I just will simply write the given and then outline for myself, these are the givens that I need in order to solve a future value problem. Now, once I know that, okay, then I can just go ahead and I can use my formula. So future value is equal to present value times the compounding factor. And I can substitute it in a regular scientific calculator, or, if I'm lucky, I can just input all of these items like PV, I, and N into, okay, an actual business calculator. And I have done a video on showing how to use a business calculator, and I'll link it in here as well. So this is what I need. Okay, let's give it a try and see what actually happens with all of these future values. So here is an example that I would like to provide to you. It says on March 17th, 2020, okay, so Bartek decided to borrow, okay, this amount. Now, notice that I'm going to highlight the entire thing here. So, and let's go through these. So I borrowed 100,000. Okay, so that's the first item that they give me. They tell me that this is at 8.5% compounded semi-annually, right? Now, before actually reading anything else, so I can recall, okay, so what do I need in order to solve these types of questions? So once I notice that it is compounded, okay, so once I know this, then I know that it is a compounding question. And right away, I will just simply say, all right, so I need to know M, I need to know N, I need to know J, and I need to know I. So let me find those. So how can I do that? Well, M is dependent on how you're compounding. So in this case, notice we are compounding semi-annually. So semi-annually, that means there are 2 terms in a year. So there is my M. So that's number 1. Now, my N is the total number of terms. But recall, what did that mean? The total number of terms is simply the number of years that you are investing or borrowing for and multiply that by M. So that's what I need. So I can look in the question and it says in the second sentence, if the loan was to be held for 30 months. So this tells me for how much time. Now, of course, this is not N because N is the number of years times M. So let me do that. I'm going to just erase this here and I will put that in. So I am investing for 30 months. Now, in order to get the number of years, I will divide by 12 because that will tell me how many years this is. And then after that, I have to multiply by M, which is simply 2. So this right here, okay, so you can work this out, okay, and you will check and see that this is simply 5. So this turns out to be 5 terms. Now, is it always going to be this nice, okay, rounded number? No. And if you watch the previous lessons, okay, on trying to find these, okay, you will notice that if it's not, just leave it as a fraction. All right. Now, my J, which is the next thing that I need to know. So my J that I have is right here. So this is my nominal interest rate, and we'll put it in. Okay, so 0.085. And now my I. Now my I, by definition, is simply your nominal interest rate, J, divided by M. Again, you can view one of the previous lessons on this to see it. So I'm going to divide this by 2, and these are now all the givens that I initially would like to start with. So what next? Well, I take a look and I see that they give me a dollar value, which is 100,000, and that's what I begin my investment. Okay, so here, this would be my present value, and we have 100,000. And now I can just go ahead and use my formula. So future value is equal to, okay, so now notice present value multiplied by 1 plus I to the power of n. And since you have all of these, so we have n, we have I, we have PV, then I can just substitute all of these in. So this will be 100,000 multiplied by 1 plus. All right, now I need my I, which is 0.085 divided by 2. So notice I don't really divide them yet. I'll let the calculator do that. And then finally, so what I have here is n is equal to 5, or whatever it could have been. So now, again, you can use either a business calculator that you don't really need the formula. You can just input all of these, okay, meaning this, this, and that. And you can look at that video if you like. Or, okay, you can just use a regular scientific calculator and input this in. Okay, my regular calculator, so I have 100, 1, 2, 3, multiplied by, and I am just inputting this in. So 1 plus 0.085 divided by 2, okay, and now raised to the exponent of 5 and hit equals. So now what I have, and I will round it to the penny, I have found my future value, okay, or in this case, what they call is maturity value. And yes, by the way, your future value, okay, so what you will see, okay, is your future value is also known as maturity value, okay, what that is when the investment or a loan matures, okay, or finishes. So maturity value, so you may see that terminology, and sometimes you may even see accumulated value, okay, accumulated value. So you might see those. So just watch out for them. All of them mean exactly the same thing, okay? So again, so just a recap, what I like to do is with these future values as you're tackling each question, I always like to state these givens, and literally they are pretty much in this order. Okay, so I know what I'm looking for, I know my formula, and then I can proceed and solve it. All right, so I hope you found this useful, and you can certainly use the future formula to find any kind of compounding that you like.